Okay, so now we're in Gearing 102. Let's say this before we even get started. If this is the first video you've clicked on of mine and you haven't watched any other videos in this series, this is probably not the video for you to start on. If you're a new player, you probably need to go even further back, but at least watch Gearing 101 and Wyvern and Y before you watch this, because the details that we're going to be getting into will make more sense once you understand basic gearing and understanding the concept of where you're going. So that's where this Wyvern and Y and Gearing 101 will help you out immensely. If you're that new, though, you probably need to go watch the basic how to re-roll or what to do after your re-roll. Those two videos would get you started in Epic 7 if you're a brand new player. So hopefully I can get the videos to show up here on screen. If not, maybe a card, or the worst case scenario, I'll get them in the description below, so you'll have the videos to Gearing 101 and Wyvern and Y down there. So, Gearing 102. Gearing 101 is more for, let's say, the first 2 weeks, 30 days of getting into the game. Gearing 102 is for more getting you to start moving forward once you've, say, beat 10-10. Now you're going to start working towards your Wyvern goals, specifically more to get to Wyvern 13, start working in Abyss, getting more of your mid-game, your early mid-game PvE content starting to really start to take shape here. So, in order to do that, we need to understand how gear rolls. And we're going to take a look at substats here. We're going to cover some basic guidelines or benchmarks of some things you're going to need to hit to make your life a lot easier along the way. We're going to talk about progressing gear and how to basically stair-step out of your starter gear and start working towards better builds, and really how to approach stuff like that. So let's talk about substats. I'm going to try to bring up a graphic here on screen. So hopefully by now there should be a graphic sitting up here that's going to show everything that I'm going to be talking about. So when we're talking about rolls, we're going to talk about the min roll and the max roll of a piece of equipment at base. So that you first understand what you're looking for with what is min rolled and max rolled, because this took me a little bit of time to grasp what is min and what is max, because you're gonna have to do a lot of picking through a lot of gear. And I'll show you that in just a few minutes. So the first stat we're going to talk about is the king stat. It's the holy grail stat of the game. It's the most important stat that you'll need to pay attention to. And that is speed. Speed is king for multiple different reasons, because it determines your turn order. It determines how fast you can cycle your skills, as far as like when you get to take another turn, whether you go first or not, or whether the boss is going to lap you or not lap you. But here's the thing. Not every unit in the game needs to be built lightning fast. Some of them will. Some of them don't. It's going to determine on what their purpose is, what are they there for, and what type of build are you trying to do. But you need to understand that before you understand the speed rolls. So, as you can see, the speed is written down as the minimum roll of 1 and the maximum of 5. Now, let's say this right here, right now. If you're doing your Wyvern hunts, or any hunt in general, and you get a 5-speed piece to drop from the hunt, that's not from Hell Raid. Hell Raid, you can buy the piece with a 5-speed roll on. But we're talking specifically in hunts, a speed set, or crit set, or hit set that rolls 5 speed. Pause this video right now if you're watching and you realize you have one, and it just dropped. Pause the video, go to your local store, buy a lotto ticket, and then hit me up in the comments below when you win the lotto, and I'll take a 10% finder's fee. So trade offer is, you get millions of dollars, I'll take a couple 10,000 for the finder's fee, and yeah, good job. So, but for the sake of the video, we're going to say that the maximum speed roll is 4. And the reason being is because it's so rare that 4 is honestly your max roll. Just consider it that. Your crit damage roll is between 3% and 7%. I had a friend tell me, though, that the epic piece, so a red piece of gear, the max roll can roll 8%. Personally, I haven't seen it. I believe them, but for the sake of the video, we're going to say it's 7% until I see a 8% crit roll, but I'm pretty sure they're right. Crit rate can roll between 3 and 5%. Your effectiveness, effective resistance, your crit or your attack, HP, and defense percent rolls can roll between 4 and 8% max stat. Now, I should say that we're not going to cover this in too much detail, and that's the flat stats. The flat stats are potentially usable for certain characters. A good example of one who benefits from having some flat stat is Tamarin. Tamarin's base HP is so low that the flat stat actually does help her out some. Now, does that mean go roll all flat stats on her gear? No. It's just saying that some flat stat is valuable to Tamarin. You still want percentage HP on her. You're going to want a lot of other stats. But for the general aspect, it's okay. Some units can take the flat attack or the flat defense. But because things are so subjective based upon where you are in the game and what units you're building, we're just going to ignore the flat stats for the most part. And obviously you can tweak your builds as you see fit for what you're trying to accomplish. So let's look at a piece of gear so that you can understand what does a max piece look like. I happen to have a really, really good rolled piece that I bought from the secret shop. And I haven't hit this yet just because I don't have a counter set ready. So there's been no point in me trying to even roll this to see where this goes. But this is what a max rolled piece looks like. So this is the perfect piece for a counter set. It's got health, defense, crit damage, and speed on it. You couldn't ask for anything more for it. Because what does a counter set need? They're probably going to be meant to take a lot of damage, so they're going to need to be bulky. So the health and defense percents, awesome. They're probably also going to hit hard in some shape, form, or another. So the crit damage is a great stat, and the speed, depending on where you want them in the turn order, this could be a very speedy helm. This could be just enough speed to give them a little bump. But everything here can roll. Now, talking about rolls, let's talk about it from this aspect. So, I can say that from my knowledge, speed will roll a maximum of 4. So, if we hit a max speed roll on this, this will go up to 8. The max health roll will go up to 16. Defense will go up to 16. And the max for crit damage will go up to 14. Now, here's where things get iffy. Is because there are minimum rolls. It can minimum on epic pieces, it can roll 1% more, technically, and 1% less, technically. But for the general census of things, RNG, we're not going to assume. Just your general thought is this can roll 1 speed more, so you can get a +5. Or this could roll +8 in speed. That's the easiest way to talk about it. And when rolling gear, you honestly have to sometimes take the lesser evil, especially where we're at right now with Gearing 102. You kind of can't be super picky. So for, let's say, a beginner, you're looking for 2 usable stats. What would be 2 usable stats? Let's look at this helmet. This would be a great example of it. The max attack roll and a max crit damage roll. Do you need the effectiveness? No. Not for everybody. But this would be an example of 2 good usable stats. You get going a little bit further in the game, you're going to need 3 usable stats. What would that be? Depending on where you're at, let's see. This would be classified as usable stats. And basically meaning is it's rolling into crit chance, speed, and attack. Honestly, HP is usable here too, but being that this is an attack set, you're after the offensive stats here. So this is also acceptable as you progress further on, and then eventually you're going to want something, again, like this helm, late game. And this is honestly even later after Gearing 102. This is a lot further down the road that you start having to get more picky when you're starting to look for stuff like this. This is where the end-game players are looking. This is when they say they didn't get an upgrade, but you see them talk, they scrapped a bunch of this stuff. It's because they're past this being usable, okay? Now, most anybody will always tell you speed check your 4 speed pieces. Reason being is because if it max rolls or near max rolls, this could still be very, very good, because when you're trying to build an initiator, which we'll go ahead and talk about that now, an initiator is a starter unit. It's the unit that goes out first that is trying to do something. In this case, a couple examples would be Flan, however you want to say your name. It would be auxiliary lots. It would be regular lots. Harado is a good example. Something that you're trying to get out in front of everybody to do a certain job. So those initiators that you start with on your team, sometimes they take absolute garbage stats all on their gear, but only because you've max rolled or you put most all your rolls into the speed stat. So it becomes they don't really need anything else because they're just there to do the one job of hit this buff off, get this one thing off, just get out in front of everybody. So some gear will be kept around like that. So I'll show you a pretty poor piece. Let's see if I go to recents, get it out of my recents. I think I have some right here that would kind of be something that you just want to scrap in general. It would look something like, good grief, have I already cleaned it all out? This would be a subjective one. This is, I know why this is locked, and I'll give you the thought process on this so that you can understand why a piece like this is technically locked, even though you've heard me already say 4 speed is max. This is 2 speed. It's near max effect resist, and it's also got flat defense, which is min rolled. This is minimum rolled flat defense. Why would I lock this? Is because technically, if I was to want to build a Soul Weaver and I need speed and effective resist on him, this might work. As soon as I get a piece that happens to roll, say, a near max effective resist, a better speed roll, and maybe defense or HP %, this helm would get kicked to the curb. But it's probably kept around just in case I get a Soul Weaver that I need to build really quickly and it happens to roll into speed and effect resist. That's why I'm hanging on to this. But for the most part, most people would scrap a piece of gear like this. Some will decide to keep it, some won't. Now, as you progress the game, you're going to start building up a lot of 3 speed pieces. And you've got to come to a point where, when do you raise your standards? That's going to be a hard decision for me to make for you. You have to come to the point where you have to say, I no longer need 3 speed. I need the max rolls. Wherever your mileage may vary on that, you will have to make the decision on where to stop taking in 3 pieces. I'm going to hang on to them for another couple months and work on gearing because I still need a couple of really fast initiators. And that's the best place to get it from, is the 3 speed, 4 speed pieces. Because you never know when RNG is going to be on your side and you roll on a purple piece, you're going to get 4 rolls on it potentially, because the 5th one of the rolls is going to have to go into the 4th stat. If it is a piece like this red piece here on this sword, I could actually get all rolls into that speed piece the whole way up. It can happen. So that's why we speed check gear, is because in case of, it could be used on an initiator. So that's kind of the basics of the base stats. Something to look for is how do pieces roll. And to quickly cover that, it comes down to, we're going to use speed as an example. So here's a speed piece. Now, obviously, don't level up blue gear if you can avoid it. You can get some really good blue gear along the way, but for the most part, the general rule of thumb, as we talked about in Gearing 101, we'll mention it again here in Gearing 102, is you typically don't level up blue gear, because it now has to take 2 rolls away from you, because it's going to have to add 2 new stat lines. But we're just using this because it's a 4-speed piece that I see right off the bat. So we're going to assume this is a purple piece, or a red piece. In this case, we can technically roll this to, if we get a max roll, this could go to 8, 12, 16, and I think it can go up to 20 or 21. I believe. I think it can go up to 20, which is huge. That's massive. That's a lot of speed on a piece. So that's max rolling. So obviously you can get anywhere between a 20, 21 piece, depending on how it rolls, because you're not always going to get max rolls. All right? You may get lucky, but you may not. When looking for rolls in like attack, defense, crit damage, you have to look at pieces. Like, I'll show you a couple of my leveled up pieces so that you can kind of see what it finishes up with. So when you get to the end, you're probably looking at a piece like this: 18% crit damage, 9% crit chance, 18% crit damage, and 6% health. I actually don't believe I touched the health on this. I think it ended up going into the other stats. So the cool thing is that there is a function in the game. I don't know if I've talked about it in gearing, but we will quickly bring it up here, is the reforging system. So you do see that I have some 90 gear, and that adds another bump to your stats. So it'll give you a bump based upon how many times you rolled into that stat. I don't have the exact specifics on each piece. Maybe if I found all the information I need, I'll put it here. If I don't find it, I will try to get that information out eventually to you guys on exactly how each piece rolls in Reforge. To me, I feel like that is getting even deeper into gearing, that you really shouldn't be concerned about that, but you just know that you can gain more stat from a Reforge. So that's the big thing I wanted to point out here, is you can add more even past what you get at plus 15. Which is why you see things that look like my Sigurd that looks a little bit different, because you see I've got some 70, I have some 75, and I have 90 gear. All 90 gear started at 85, and nothing else can be reforged in the game. So now that we've actually made it to Sigurd, this is a perfect segue to start giving you some guidelines, some benchmarks. What are you looking for, and why are we building this? Let's say right here, if you have any questions on substats, hit me up in the comments below, hit me up on stream. We can talk about it more. But the basics are, depending on the type of unit you're building, will determine the substats you need. And depending on what their role is, will determine even more what they need. And also, what units are you using? If that makes sense. So, talking about some guidelines, we're going to specifically talk about your progression towards Wyvern 13. So, some of you already may be well on your way there. You may be already up into Wyvern 11, maybe Wyvern 12, but you're not quite getting there. We're going to talk about some things you need along the way to help make this trip a lot easier. So, we're going to use Sigurd as an example. We're going to talk about my Wyvern team a little more in depth, and give you the benchmarks that you kind of need to hit along the way. So the big important thing here with Sigurd is Sigurd has a couple different variations of her build, which we've talked about already. Now, my Sigurd, again, I'll say is slow as dirt because I have General Purgus. And because of his passive, allows me to keep my Sigurd slow as dirt. Because every time he gets hit, he pushes Sigurd up a percentage every time. So that's how I'm able to get away with it. The way I went about this is my gear was kind of garbage. It actually ended up on my Clarissa here. That right side gear was initially Sigurd's gear. Was it good enough at the time for me to beat Wyvern 13? No. It took me 51 days before I could get the first auto clear. Now keep in mind, it was a luck sack clear, because I immediately tried it again after that and I failed 19 out of 20 runs. 19 out of 20 failed runs. I got lucky. Basically with debuffs and everything, the stars aligned and allowed me to do it. But still, at 51 days, I was able to click the auto button and forget about it once. Now, moving on, your first few weeks of progression in Wyvern won't be like that. Maybe it will be. Maybe your attack set will roll better. But for me, with my Sigurd, the big thing that you want to note is you're going to want roughly 50% or higher crit chance. And the reason I say 50% is because with Furious and his crit buff, he can cut your gear requirement down significantly. Because of his crit buff, you technically don't need to have anything more than, say, 50%, technically. Which will give you a 100% crit rate buff. But if you want to be able to use the unit anywhere outside of Wyvern or attacking a red unit, you'll probably want higher crit chance. Mine's floating around 80. I've still got a lot of room to make her gear better, but with where she's at and the way my team's working, I have around a 95% success rate in Wyvern with this specific setup, and until I make her rage set for the one-shot team, I find no value in changing anything, because if it isn't broke, don't fix it. That's something you will learn very early on, is because you may think it looks better, but it doesn't. It doesn't actually end up being better. So, crit chance, I've got mine around 80%. She occasionally misses her crit. It's very sad, but remember there's always a 15% innate resist baked into the game, so you always have a 15% chance to fail everything. So fail your crit, fail your debuff, it's always baked in, so you can't have a 100% success rate. With crit damage, you're basically after as much crit damage as possible on Cigarette, because again, that's where her damage comes from. It scales so well with the Daydream Joker, you can get a lot of damage. Now the next big benchmark, which is where I had to take some weird kind of losses but gains on my gear, is I actually rolled a few attack pieces. I think it's the chest plate that I rolled a lot of effectiveness on. Typically, I would have been mad about that if it weren't for the fact that when I had this at this point, her effectiveness was crap. I mean, we're talking in the low at this point, because I think this was one of the first pieces I rolled. Her effectiveness was down in the 40s. So this brought me up to usable. Then I lost some when I changed out of here, but then I got this helmet and it made it better. And I think I lost some here and it made it better. Actually, I think this was just straight crit damage, crit jump for me. And also I think the ring, I think is where I gained most of her attack from because of the 60%. But you're looking for around 65% effectiveness on your gear. And the reason being is because with Sigrid, you want to be able to land the unhealable and the bleed debuff with her skills. And as well as any of your other debuffers, you want them to have at least 65% effectiveness or higher. She doesn't need effect resist and dual attack chance. Don't even worry about it. Obviously with Sigrid, the higher the attack, the better. Now, I will say this, if you're not using General Purgus, a stat you actually have to really focus in on as a progressing into Wyvern 13 is you will need her to cycle much faster. So you will have to come off the attack stat, whether you're going to make a sacrifice somewhere. Probably that's going to come off of the attack stat. And you're going to need to get speed. The reason you're going to need to get speed is you want to aim for around 180 speed minimum on Wyvern 13 because you don't want the Wyvern to lap you. You want to take as many turns as possible. And I think when I was starting, they said that space is right around 180 speed is the slowest you really want your units. So you would need a speed set at that point, or a lot of speed, and I mean a lot of speed in an attack set. So everything else after here you'll see is much faster, significantly faster than my Sigrid. So on my team, my main defense breaker is my Luluka. Honestly, she's also my main DPS. When you look at the chart, she does more damage than Sigrid. Why? Because of her skill 1. Because of the exclusive equipment and the way that works, it allows her to do more damage. But here, she is the fastest unit on my team at 203 speed. I've given her enough bulk to live through a couple hits, because you will get hit in the beginning through the first mobs. It's just inevitable. And she's got okay attack stat. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. Here, I was more after the effectiveness and crit damage and getting her crit chance above or near 65%. I was using Furious while she was initially on my team, but then after Furious, I just haven't been able to get any more crit chance out of my gear. I could gain a lot by getting a new necklace and a ring set, but because of the way this broken set is changed for her effectiveness, I haven't gotten an upgrade yet that works for her. So for now, I'm taking the loss on the crit rate. She does her job. Like I said, I've got a 95% success rate, even with her crit chance being that low. She's still technically diced to roll higher, to more likely hit her crit than not hit her crit. So that's my Luluka. The next unit I use is Clarissa. And notice here, her effectiveness is 75% right here. I'll move over just a little bit too. Her speed is 177, brings her in, I think, at the second fastest unit on the team. She is my alternate defense breaker, so I do have double defense breakers, as well as she is my main poison dealer. Between both of her skill 3 and her skill 1, I have a bunch of debuffs. I've actually been able to generate a second row of debuffs on a few of my Wyverns, from how many between Sigrid and Clarissa, just having a max roll of debuffs. Here, again, I kind of just took whatever, because this is the old free set that I took off of Sigrid. I threw a couple random accessories on her to make it work, and it's working. Again, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Yes, I would love to see way more damage, way more everything on her, but for right now, it's working. So I'm not going to try to improve upon what is already very successful. I've hit the requirements. I'm above 65% crit chance, above 65% effectiveness. She's got some bulk to live through a couple hits from the mobs. She's everything you want. Now, for me, my General Purgus actually has my old Montmorency set minus the ring. I made the ring specifically for him. But for anybody who's starting, you take your free HP set and you put it either on your Montmorency or you put it on your Angelica, which you can now get from Connections, which she is down here in the not leveled area. I use Montmorency as my tank up to Wyvern 12, and then I use General Purgus. But we're going to talk about him as if he is Montmorency for you, because most of you will not start with General Purgus. So, do note that his effect resistance is 76%. Now, Montmorency's also gaining another 18% here, because I also have her triple S and I have her concentration imprint. With your Montmorencys, you are going to be needing a lot of effect resist because you don't want her pushed back. It gets more devastating with Montmorency of being pushed back because when the Wyvern hits you, every time the Wyvern has a chance to push you back. With General Purgus, you don't care because he's pushing your DPS forward. So you want him to get attacked. And it doesn't matter if he takes a turn or not. Sure, it's great when he takes a turn and you get the attack buff. Who doesn't want more attack? I want more attack. So, with General Purgus, it doesn't really matter if he gets pushed back to the end of the line. Mine's tanky enough, and especially with this artifact, this is the cheap version of the Proof of Valor, which is what some people may have to use on their Montmorencys. Some may have to use, or their Angelicas, they may have to... actually, no. They will not be able to use Proof of Valor. I think that's a warrior. But typically, anyway, you want to use Rod of Amaryllis. Yeah, you want to use Rod, which is Soul Weaver. Yeah, they can't use this. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired after working on this video all day. This is like my 5th attempt at it, trying to get everything out right. But you want your tank to be as bulky as possible. I also added some defense, and this actually ended up rolling better than both of my max HP rings. That the extra defense on him turned out to be technical more stat for him to take more hits. So my General Purgus is a Wyvern tank Purgus. He's not a PvP unit. If he's a PvP unit, he gets a completely different build. So, but for you, most of you, what you're after is just a crap ton of defense, a crap ton of HP, and a crap ton of ER. That's what you're after for your Soul Weaver tank. Most of you are going to use Montmorency or Angelica. So let's talk about progressing gear now. And I think a good example of stepping out of gear is seeing the Sigrid. Now, this is where things get a little bit hairy, dicey, not quite what you want to hear what you'll hear from the meta slaves. You sometimes have to make small upgrades. And I've already talked about this before everywhere, and I'm going to bring this up one last time because gearing 102, this is what's so important about this section, is the progression to Wyvern 13. I'm going to tell you my story very quickly so that you can understand this. As I said, I was trying to do Wyvern 13 from day 51. I was finally 51 days into the game. I was trying to hit Wyvern 13. I could only clear up to Wyvern 12, and Wyvern 12 was doable. I didn't fail it a lot, but I wasn't succeeding all the time. So I spent from April 15th until May 1st. I think May 2nd. Yeah, May 2nd is when I actually cleared with a 90% success rate that day all my Wyvern runs. And the big key for me was a change of a couple different things. I had been working on my Sigrid gear a lot. This is where I'd been working on over the couple days because there was a hunt buff coming up. And I was farming Golem to get an attack piece to get an upgrade, because Clarissa's gear, the gear that's on Clarissa, I just didn't feel like it was cutting it for Wyvern. I didn't feel like I was dealing enough damage, which was true. It was a part of my problem. I had just gotten Luluka, and I was working on gearing her up. I ended up having her, I think, much faster than this, but I changed it around and I slowed her down. I got more effectiveness on her, and this ended up working out a lot better for her. She got more, I think she got a little more damage over in her attack stat, but I think she lost. I think I had a much higher crit chance. And I think it came because I had a crit rate set on her. But I dialed this in. We got that done. I also pulled Clarissa, I think we pulled Clarissa on the Roana and Euphine banner. One of those is where I pulled her as one of my 4 stars. So my issue was I didn't really have sets built up. So as I ended up replacing the Sigrid pieces, I noticed I still had the attack set. And so I built her a right side set of gear to make her work. I knew as soon as I got her, I just had to do Holo Trials next week to get her exclusive equipment. I happen to have Junkyard Dog. This is a limited artifact from a collab, so you're not going to have this, but this helped get me another debuff. I'm like, I am securing the fact that I'm going to have enough debuffs. That was my goal. That was my mentality. By stair-stepping, this is what I mean. You're going to probably come to a situation at some point from now till you can completely and 100% clear most all of the early game PvE content. And we're not talking about the super hard abyss levels and all that stuff. We're talking getting Wyvern 13, getting your general PvE on lockdown to where you don't struggle in your Hell raid, where you don't struggle in your normal raids. You're working on your Nyx Seed clear because you're trying to get the crit damage set that I have here on Cirilla. This could end up being your Sigrid set. This could be your Alexa set. For me, as an example of progression, this set is good for me for trying to do my Banshee one-shot team, but it's not good enough. I'm short like 60,000 HP from being able to one-shot it. Sure, I need to finish biking off, but I'm probably going to have to replace a piece or two to get that one-shot, or I have to somehow make Vivian better or Tieria better in order to get the one-shot team. So don't be afraid to go make that grind. If you happen to roll this, and let's say it rolls all into health and a little bit of crit chance, it's okay if you went into Banshee and you farm Banshee till you get you a new helm or the ability to craft a new helm, and it rolls stats like this again, and then you take another crack at it, and it happens to be an 85 piece now, and it rolls really good. Now you can reforge that, and now you have a scenario like Sigrid where you roll that piece, it rolls really good, it gives you everything you need for the most part along the way, and you're able to move on. A lot of people will say it's not worth your time. I'm telling you from the way I've played, my progression, where I've come from the games I've played, this is the way to go to help make it easier along the way, because it may be weeks before you see another piece. And I'm going to give you a prime example right here. I will show this to the world. I am not ashamed. This is a prime example of moving to the next piece, raising your standards up and moving on. So yes, this is a horrible rolled piece by all standards for LQC. It's the right stats of 2 of them, but it's not what it should have rolled into. I rather take the attack percent and lose the speed set to gain the attack percentage, because I haven't been able to get a attack percent ring to roll crit damage, crit chance that is high enough to be worthy, and I haven't been able to get it even to show it with speed or HP, defense, or just any of those combinations. I haven't been able to do it, and I've been at it for 2.5 weeks trying to get a actual attack percent ring. So I took the loss with all those crafted rings, went into this ring that I happened to have looted already, and it was worth it in the end because I got the attack stat where I wanted it, but now my substats are subpar for where I need it to be. So now my new standard is this ring doesn't get upgraded now until it's a speed ring with crit damage, crit chance. I'm honestly looking for HP percent would be nice, but it needs to, for me, for me, I would rather it go more into crit damage And honestly, if it happens to hit a speed roll, great. HP roll, great. A crit chance roll, great. It makes the Hellcutter need a little less time to spool up. So this is a prime example of sometimes you just got to take and work with what you have. That's really what it comes down to in the end. Now, I said here at the end, I'm going to show you a couple different types of builds so that you can understand, because you've heard me talk about Initiator, you hear me talk about DPS, Tank, all this stuff. So we're going to show you an example of a DPS unit, which would be Sigrid. Sigrid is a great damage dealer. She will be your one of your main damage dealers for quite a long time. Another good example of a main damage dealer is Judge Kisei. I adore her. She was my first ML5. She was my first 10 pull coming into the game after my selective summon. This was her. I love her to death, and I need to treat her so much better than what she has here on gear. But until I can get all my expedition stuff taken care of, I can't justifiably work on her, but someday she will be perfectly built, and I can't wait for that day. This is another great example of a DPS unit. We're going to bring up two different types of tanks. And the reason I'm going to show you Fighter Maya is because Fighter Maya, you want more defense and crit damage. And the reason it's basically for that is off of her passive. Or not her passive, but her S3s, because she increases the damage dealt by 300% when somebody's below 30% HP, and the damage is scaled off of her defense. So in this case, you're trying to get defense is her attack stat. And then on top of that, you want the crit damage, because when you hit this thing, you want to send them to the moon. It is great. If you come hang out on stream, I use her occasionally in Guild Wars, and it's fun to bonk somebody with her skill 3. It's great. Another example of a good type of knight is something that, again, these units aren't something you guys are going to start with, but it's the only thing I can show you that I have built. And I want to show you them built so that you can understand where we're going and where the progressions are. Lilius is another type of tank. She's a different type of unit. She's more for cleansing and dual attacking. She's a different type of tank. She's not a super beefy, you're going to sit there and just bang on, like, say, General Purgus, who's meant to just sit there on Wyvern and just take a hit after hit after hit after hit. He's not that type of bulky. I would like to get her a little more bulky than where she's at, but this is just what I have to deal with right now. And unfortunately, I can't really make any more upgrades right now. Will it happen? Yes. But you can see I've got her around 18,000 health. I'd like to get her around 20,000 health. I'd like to get her effective resist, I think, up a little bit more. I'd like to see a little more speed on her to get her out in front of a few other units. But overall, with the way the gear rolled, I can't really do much right now. Let's talk about a bruiser. One of my favorite bruisers in the game. You guys may hear me talk about her a lot on stream, on wherever, and that is Alencia. Alencia is one of my favorite bruisers in the game. Her S3 I jokingly call Dragon Lolly Roar. You guys know I'm a Fairy Tail fan, for those of you who have watched me on stream. So here you're basically after a lot of HP. There's a lot of units in the game that scale off HP, and typically they are bruiser units. So they're going to be some of your knights, like, say, Crow, Alencia. I'm trying to think, there's another one that's not coming. I think Roz might be one, which everybody starts with Roz and you eventually upgrade them to Adventurer Roz. But here's a prime example of somebody I'm working on currently. I need to replace her sword, and I think her helmet may need to be... This one's not bad. It's doable for now. Yeah, the sword is what I wanted to work on. So the next unit we want to talk about is a support unit. So a support unit, the best support in the game, she's right here. Whoop, wrong one. I scrolled up one too many. Tamarin. Tamarin is the trash can of gear. It's so horrible to say like that, but it's the truth. It really is. You can literally put anything, your scrap gear on her and make her work. But honestly, what you're after is you're after HP. You want her fast so that she can cycle as quick as possible. You're wanting effective resist, HP, defense. You want her tanky because she's squishy. She will get popped. Flat attack here, again, as I said earlier, is valuable. Do consider that. I think I've got it right here. Flat attack on her necklace just to help boost her up some, to give her a little extra. Then we're going to talk about an initiator. The only initiator that I am currently working on is Flan right here. As you can see, I'm working on her build. And by initiator, all I'm after is the speed set and max speed rolls. I don't care about anything else. Now, I am trying to progress it with a effectiveness set so that she does land her defense break along the way. So I am trying to make sure that I keep it within a hit set to make sure that she has more effectiveness later on. So effectiveness and speed are the big things I'm after here. So all my gear I'm working on, I'm slowly tapping this because I don't have a lot of resources to throw into an initiator right now because I don't really use initiators. And it comes down to accessories. I've been blowing through so many accessory charms that I haven't been able to even try to level this. This isn't even a very good option for her, but it's the only 4-speed necklace I have right now that's even in hit set or speed that I could even attempt to consider leveling for her. Is it the best stat for her? No. But if this thing max rolls speed along the way, I don't even care anymore that it's not percentage HP. Like, sure, later down the road, that'd be great, but if this max rolls HP or speed, I don't care. It's still going to be fast. And then the last thing we want to talk about is the... Actually, no, that does cover it. We've talked about the DPS, the Bruiser, the Support, the Initiator, and the Knights. An example of a Knight that it gets built a little bit different, just really quick, so that another example is somebody like Senya. You build no crit chance, no damage, no crit damage into, you go attack and bulk. Really weird Knight build. You don't see too many builds like that. And the only reason I mention her is just because I just saw her and I'm like, wait, I know she's built completely different than most of your Knights. So this is where I'm saying it's subjective. You have to look at what you're building, where you're wanting to go, who are you after. You have to work with what you're given. Most of you are starting here with one of these sets. Build it up, level it up, get it going. You know, I want to say thank you to the community. You guys have been awesome and helped me so much along the way, giving me advice, helping me build units, supporting me and giving me knowledge. And, you know, today in stream, everybody helped me out along the way and gave me a lot of advice about doing this video. I had already recorded 3 of these this morning, and this is my 4th attempt at it just because or 5th, technically. I wanted to make sure I get you the information concisely, properly, because this is the next step. Yes, is there more to gearing? Absolutely. This is Gearing 102. Later on, down the road, we'll start a new series for the next segments of gearing, where we go in much deeper, where we'll actually talk about units in specifics and what are we trying to do as I'm working on that progression. I might even carry you guys along the way and start talking about my progression into expeditions and things like that, so that you can see the progression. This was my first 100. This was my first 100 days. This is actually day 111 for me inside of Epic 7. Today is day 111. So this is my gift back to the community to say thank you. Is here we go. This is now. Let me help you progress in this game. So, will there be more stuff in the beginner's handbook? I don't know. It depends on what comes out in the game or what else we feel is necessary for the beginner's handbook. Maybe everything after this goes into the next series, titled to come later. Will there be another series? As long as I'm playing this game and I'm having fun, yes, I will go into the next step for the next progression. And we'll look at this for the next 6 months of progression. But for now, that's going to take care of the beginner's handbook. Thank you guys so much for sticking through this extremely long video, this extremely detailed and complex, complicated video to get out. This is not an easy video to make because there's so much subjectiveness, so much information to have to give you out there. Let's just say this. If you still have questions, the best thing you can do is try to come catch me live on stream. If you can't, hit me up in the comments and I'll try to help you out as best as possible. Again, everything is subjective. You can always play the game the way you want to play it. If you want to put an attack crit rate set on her, do it. Is it the best idea? No, because that's not how she works. She scales off HP, proportional to caster's max HP. But if it's what you want to do, you can do it. Just, it's not going to do what you expect it to do. So, thank you guys so much. If you enjoyed this video, this series, make sure to like, subscribe, pass this around to your friends if you want somebody to start Epic 7. Share this with everyone. Thank you again just so much for all the support. Everyone here on YouTube, you have been so awesome. The views that you've put into these videos in the last few days it just blows my mind. Y'all are blowing this up more than anything I have done in any series or anything I've done. You guys are amazing. I thank you so much. I look forward to hanging out with all of you. I'll see you guys in the next one.